are the Bass Nerds.
Beep, 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 beep. He made a face. Perfect.
I'm Jody, and I'm here with
Mark.
And we have a very special guest, Chicago band, rock gods.
Well, they're kind of from everywhere now, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I discovered this band in the mid-2000s in Chicago, I think playing Wicker Park Fest or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah. And introduce yourself.
I'm Brian Cook. I don't know, of Russian Circles and Sumac and Botch and These Arms Are Snakes.
And Torment and Glory.
We'll
get to that.
Yeah. Various things.
Well, welcome to the podcast. We appreciate you coming.
Oh, happy to be here.
Yeah, like I said, I first discovered, would have been like mid-2000s, and I was in a band that was music not at all like Russian Circles, but a couple members of the band were big into like noise rock, and they were like, bro, check this out. And it was, it was like one of those moments where it's like, I didn't know music could really be this, which is like, not to say that you guys were, the Russian Circles was the first band to do like heavy instrumental stuff, but it like as a like mid-20-something Chicago musician, it was nice and refreshing to see a band like that who was doing it and playing some cool stages and like doing some awesome stuff, So I know how long have you been in Russian Circles?
I started playing with them in 2007.
Okay.
Mainly just because they had just parted ways with Colin, the original bass player, but they were already slated to record an album in Seattle.
Okay.
And my other band, These Arms Are Snakes, had done a few shows with them, and I'd hung out with Mike and Dave a little bit outside of band stuff too. Just randomly. And they were recording with Matt Bayless, who was a friend of mine, and it was just like, why don't I just play bass on this? Because I like you guys, I know your music, and I already live in Seattle. And
so you just talked yourself into the band?
I guess. I mean, I was still playing in another band, and I didn't really want to like jeopardize things by like juggling two bands, but the chemistry was good and it was fun, and I think it was just kind of a nice moment of branching out from playing super hectic, chaotic.
Yeah.
But you were in Seattle music at the time?
Yeah.
And they just happened to be doing an album out there at the time?
Yeah. So that was already all set up. And it's just like, I'll play on the record, I'll keep it simple. And then I think they did one tour after that with another bass player. And they're like, I don't think we're going to do that again. We'll just wait till you're available. And then I apparently joined the band at some point when I was drunk. So they waited till I was heavily inebriated to ask, and so I have no real memory of officially
kind of
joining.
Adorable.
You're just like, hey, you're supposed to be at rehearsal today. Where are you at? Or like,
no, I think it was, it was like one of those things where it's moving forward, they kind of wanted to figure out if like I was going to be available to do stuff, or if they were going to have to find like a rotating cast of fill-ins, and they're like, so are you going to be our guy or what? Yeah, I'll do it.
I love you, bro.
Yeah. So, man, that was probably 2008, and here we are 16 years later.
Awesome. That's really awesome. Well, so we typically start the podcast with like, what was the beginning for you? Did you come from like a musical family? When did you pick up your first instrument? Like, where's
your story start?
Yeah, where's the origin?
My mom played piano and organ, but like wasn't really like a musical family beyond that. I just remember hearing songs on the radio when I was 5 and being sort of interested in music, and because there's a piano in the house, I started tinkering around on that pretty young, and then I think my parents were like, oh, he's interested in music, let's get him piano lessons. And then once I had to learn stuff, I just wasn't
more about it.
I wasn't into it. And then
you're such a rebel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still bad. Like, I just don't know a lot of music theory or terminology or anything like that. I like the mystery of finding things that work. And then
I think that's a much more, not much more, but that's a really great way to create music and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Just like you naturally discovered unexplored territory.
What
Where
was
it's
the
like,
quote I heard recently? I can't remember who said it, but it was something like, "Your ear is the number one tool to determine what's cool when
Yeah.
it comes to music."
right.
I can't remember who the fuck said it. I watched it on Instagram, but I mean, it really rings true that, like, I mean, all the theory in the world is great, and I'm not downplaying that
Absolutely
at any
not,
means.
yeah.
But
Sometimes I
this is
find,
the thing. It
yeah.
could be written cool, but
Oh, yeah.
how's it sound?
And
right?
sometimes you like, I find that sort of knowledge and stuff just gets in the way.
for some people, for sure.
It's a,
you know?
something, then you have to like find this space where you like break that cycle
Right.
of like, oh, well, this happens and this should.
I should be playing this scale, but you know what the coolest scale to play is?
Yeah.
A chromatic scale sometimes, you know, like
yeah.
that tension and release sometimes is really the play on things. But like I had an in-depth discussion with Anthony Wellington about this one day.
He's another like big bass
Plays
dude.
with, he's Victor Wooten's bass player.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, you know, and he's a theory guy, you know, but plays with Wooten, who's not a theory guy, you know, and, you know, I was kind of trying to convey that same message, like, you know, I know you're a theory guy, but what I'm drawn to as a musician is sometimes surprising myself when I'm playing something and doing something kind of weird. And he goes, I do the same thing, but I have this foundation that I can build off of, that I feel more informed when I'm doing that thing, you know, which I think there's merits to both sides of the thing. Obviously,
it seems like it's something really handy when you're working with other musicians, that you're both on the same page when you're talking about something, and that's something I definitely lack.
Sure.
But
it has not held you back in any way at all.
I just force myself on other people, and
and then they call you when you're drunk.
Yeah,
take advantage of you.
Exactly. Yeah,
it happens, man.
So, what kind of like music were you surrounded by as a kid? Like, what were your parents listening to?
Again, my parents weren't like super big music people, but you know, my dad liked a lot of disco.
Okay.
But it was kind of that era, you know, like early 80s.
Just what the pop thing was at the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my mom, in my memory, I feel like my mom was really into like a lot of the sort of 60s and 70s folk stuff, like Simon and Garfunkel and
Joni Mitchell.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I don't think they weren't big record collectors or anything like that. It wasn't like that was the stuff that was in our record collection, but that was like the radio station.
Sure. When you're in the car, this is what you're listening to.
Yeah. Right? So for me, it's like Jim Croce and Harry Chapin and things like that were like some of the first things I remember hearing as a kid and being like, I don't know anything about music, but I like that.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
What do you, if you could think about like, what do you like? What did you like about it? What drew you to those artists?
I think it's very simple and unadorned a lot of times. And that's still something I think I really like, where it's just, you know, when folk artists start adding like orchestral elements, it's just like, oh, you're just moving it away from the song. You know, I like the Woody Guthrie, like you only need 2 chords and the rest is showing off. Like if the essence of the song is good, that's kind of all you need, which probably sounds like bullshit because my bass rig is like a Taurus and keyboards. And, you know, it's like prog rock, teenage fantasy stuff. But, you know, I think the thing that initially wrote me in was just like really simple, easy digest music.
Sure.
You know, a couple chords and a strong vocal melody, and that's it.
So you're a kid, you start fiddling with the piano, you take some lessons, realize this isn't the kind of direction you want to go in. What's like the next step?
You know, so I'd say by the time I was like in 4th or 5th grade, I started buying cassette tapes, and I really liked like 80s commercial radio rock stuff. So I liked Survivor, and I liked
nice.
You know, the Peter Cetera era of Chicago and stuff like that.
What was your haircut like? Did you grow your hair out to match?
Oh no. I was always like a flat top kid, you know. Nice. It's like the era of Stand By Me, where it's like, haircuts again. So yeah. And I loved like the 50s oldies stuff. You know, that also went hand in hand with that. And then, you know, I think right around 6th grade, you know, just the cusp of adolescence, it was like hearing stuff like Depeche Mode and The Cure on the radio, which wasn't necessarily topping the charts, but it was at least getting some like MTV play, and things like the Pixies and REM and hearing all that stuff, I was like, oh, this is like, this seems to have a little more substance than the average radio song. And there seems
Yeah.
to be something there that's kind of alluring and felt maybe a bit more genuine than just, you know, people singing about having a good time or whatever.
Which is fucking fun, you know.
Yeah,
That
no,
stuff's fun.
no slight on that stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, I had a brief hair metal phase too, but I think
So did Pantera.
Right.
worked out for them just fine.
That's fucking right.
Yeah. Neil Young had a disco phase, right? Is that what he?
So did the Grateful Dead.
Yeah,
So did
I think everyone had a disco phase.
Yeah, it's
Right.
called. It's all called
Oh,
cocaine.
yeah,
Let's just call it what it is.
Robert Plant had a disco, like somebody I saw on Instagram, his disco song. It wasn't like disco, but it wasn't not disco. I can't
Disco
remember.
adjacent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was clear, like, this is not Led Zeppelin, you know,
Yeah.
this is like some
I
pop
dig
thing
it.
of the time,
It's
you
fun.
know.
It's
Yeah.
super fun. That's a recent discovery for me is disco.
Is
I
disco?
Oh, dude, disco
used
is
to
awesome.
hate it, and then then all of a sudden it just sort of clicked one day. And
Mhm.
I'm talking like maybe within the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Where I'm all about it. I think that's also musical. Like the trend is like there was like some more disco influence.
Yeah, it's like
always
coming
liked-
back a lot of.
I always like Jamiroquai as well.
Okay.
Sure.
That was another
And that's
one.
obviously got like some disco influence, but like
Yeah.
modern pop, the Dua Lipas and what's his name? The short guy,
Oh, Bruno Mars.
Bruno Mars,
Yeah.
got a lot of like disco influence in it. And I
Yeah.
think disco has a lot of really killer bass lines. That kind of,
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
you know, four to the floor-y kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's what drew me to it when I was like in my late teens. I went through like a year of just like everything I could find disco and like really listening to those bass lines, and
Yeah.
definitely colored the way I
Coincidentally,
played.
that was the era that you were heavy into cocaine
Rock and roll and bell bottoms.
and bell bottoms too. Yeah, I had one pair of them. You ever have bell bottoms?
I think they were called bootcut, but
Oh,
they,
my bad.
but you know, yeah, they're
Bootcut.
definitely.
That's how you sell it to like the construction workers and shit.
Yeah.
These are boot cut. Those are nice bell bottoms, the Rick.
Little flare.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that. Well, so you find like The Cure, Depeche Mode, like those kinds of bands have a bit more substance. Like, were you like really like a bookworm back then? Like super into like reading and literature and stuff, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
I think-
usually that kind of ties together.
I think there's a little bit of that. You know, I think also, you know, being like 12 and again, like on the cusp of adolescence and
Yeah.
sort of having this thing lingering in the back of my mind where it's like, I
Who
don't
am
think
I?
I'm like the other kids. I don't want to go to the mall and look at girls. You know, I'm like this burgeoning closeted queer kid. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, like Robert Smith and Michael Stipe seem like way cooler than Vince Neil and Steven Tyler. Like I feel like I identify with those people a bit more. So I think there was like a little bit of that too, even though that wasn't at the forefront of my thoughts, you know, some like subconscious
Right.
thing.
But there was a calling.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just
Yeah,
like,
you were just more drawn to that than the typical thing of the time that everybody else was,
yeah.
you know.
And I think I just got really interested in music that was like maybe had a little bit more staying power. Because I remember, you know, that was also the era of like Janet Jackson and Paula Abdul and
Right.
like a lot of that pop music where it was really hot for 6 months and then all of a sudden like all your friends are like, oh, that's not cool anymore. And
Right.
it's like, oh, okay, well,
That shit is still cool.
well, that's the
Well,
funny
it came
thing.
back
like,
around. for
everything
sure.
comes back around, and you know, but like just the idea that music is only has like a shelf life as long as it's like actively on the charts was just
Right.
like really repellent to me.
But aren't you feeling that a bit now with just how like inundated with information we are and how accessible everything
Oh
is?
yeah, I mean we're dealing with a similar but different scenario now where it's just like, you know, now the shelf life of something is like 2 weeks until a new record comes out to distract us.
And when you say record, you mean single, right?
Yeah.
A new single comes out,
Yeah.
and another new single comes out. Nobody's putting out records anymore.
When a viral video comes out that
Right.
gets everyone excited about.
Another thing. So you're doing that. At what point do you pick up a guitar or a bass? And
Yeah, so I picked up a bass when I was 14. It was right around that time I got really into skateboarding too, and then
Yeah.
like skateboarding with like Thrasher and like their music coverage and like, you know, the sessions advertisements with like the list of bootleg T-shirts in the back,
Right.
and that kind of like,
Man, that's just so cool.
yeah, I was just like, oh, who's Social Distortion? Who's Bad Religion? And like
Right.
then discovering all that stuff, it's like, oh, this is like a whole new world, and it's just like approachable, because I just didn't really have the musical knowledge to understand how something like Van Halen worked. It's
Sure.
like that's virtuoso stuff, but then you hear Minor Threat, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I think I could play that. Like,
Uh-huh.
I think I could be in a band, and I picked bass just because I was left-handed, and I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I couldn't find a left-handed bass, so it was like, all right,
This seems a little easier to kind of like force yourself to do.
yeah.
What's really funny is when you walked up, there was a lady who was walking down the street, and she just stopped. She's like, "Do you work here?" I was like, "No, I'm doing a film session here." She's like, "Well, do you know anything about guitars?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so she was asking. She's like, "So I've always wanted to play guitar,
Mhm.
and like, what do you say to somebody who's left-handed? Like, what's your advice to them?" And I was like, "Well, like, you're living in a time where left-handed instruments are a lot easier to find and stuff, but I say just sit it on your lap, feel what's natural." I usually tell kids or parents with young kids, like if you can get them to start on a right-handed instrument and build that like sort of dexterity and being ambidextrous and stuff,
Mhm.
that'll help, but if they still feel they need to flip it over, like fuck, Jimi Hendrix did it upside down, right?
Yeah.
But like, did you find yourself struggling with the bass when you first started?
Well, not really, but I think before that it was Hawaii, and so we had music classes, and that always involved the ukulele,
Mhm.
and there was always like one left-handed ukulele, and everything else was right-handed, and there's probably like 4 left-handed kids in every class, so
Right.
I think just I got used to at least the feel of a necked
Yeah.
instrument, just from that, and so I don't. My brother borrowed a bass guitar from someone for a couple weeks, and I think that's really when I held like an actual bass guitar for the first time. And
Older or younger brother?
older.
Did he know that you were holding the bass at the time?
Oh, I'm
Like
sure.
just
he
sneak
did.
into his room and you're like, "Oh, check
I mean,
this out."
there might have been some of that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just like, yeah, it felt comfortable right away, and then you find how the notes relate to each other right away, and within 30 minutes, it's like coming up with songs and bass lines that are.
Were you just tapping at the time? Like was like, did you find that like being left-handed, you were just kind of like, "Oh, I have a lot more ability with this hand"?
I don't even remember. I feel like, yeah, I don't remember at all.
Hmm.
I just remember still like being really into chords, or like strumming the open D and then adding notes on the G string on top, and having, like, oh, there's like an underlying note with like a melody on top of it. This is
What is this? A fifth? What is that? This sounds like
Yeah.
heavy.
yeah, and then figuring out it's like, oh, all these notes sound really good together, and then you kind of run through it a few times, and it's like, oh, because that's a major scale. I just
Right.
yeah.
And that style of playing is really like baked into your DNA then, because that's like I can think of like several songs across several projects that you've been involved in, and like that sort of like open string, like, and then moving around is like that's super cool.
Yeah.
So it just started right away.
Yeah, I think I just naturally gravitated towards that.
Awesome.
And it was, I think
Is it guitar envy? Is that what it was?
there's probably a little bit of that, but
Yeah.
I think also it was like it probably lined up perfectly with listening to like Jane's Addiction and stuff like that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Eric Avery did a little bit of that, and so I think it was just, I just thought that's how you did it, and went from there.
Nice.
Mhm.
So you were into skateboarding
Oh yeah,
when you're back then. I'm so jealous.
I was terrible at it. I was not good at it.
Still,
I was into skateboarding too, but I was also terrible and
Yeah.
never
and
became
so I've
good
always
at
been
it.
so afraid of falling down.
Well,
Just in
It
general,
happened.
I didn't stick with it very long, because then it was just like, well, if I fall,
I'm screwed.
then I don't get to play bass anymore. And
Oh.
that was
That was your like life obsession at that point, right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
I had enough kind of gnarly spills where I thought maybe I broke a wrist or something. Or
Here it is again, fucking YYZ. vibrating in my
I feel like I
hands.
passed a test there. I feel like
I wasn't even trying to test you. I was more so testing myself. I'm like, am I the only one who's ever going to recognize this? So now that there's another person out there who knows, you and my brother, and now you. Like,
Well,
are the
now
only-
I've never felt the phone vibration, but now I know.
Well, I had it sitting on a table,
Uh-huh.
and my brother was just like, is that fucking YYZ? I'm like, yeah, dude. You can program your phone, your iPhone, to have a very special vibration. You can tap the rhythm in there that you want. So fun little trick.
I'm gonna do Firestorm by Earth Crisis. Where my brain goes with that.
Nice. I'll do next one will be Bleed by Meshuggahs.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, like that drum pattern, like I've always wanted to like ask. I don't know the drummer's name, but I've always want to ask him like, was that just you like sort of like dicking on Hot for Teacher? Because if you listen to the very beginning of that,
Yeah.
it's that rhythm, and then he adds like all the cool the other stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
It's got to be.
They both sound like maybe an accident or maybe like
Yeah.
Just warming up, you know,
someone threw
just
some tennis shoes and a dryer and
This sounds so cool. I'm gonna recreate that perfectly.
and I'm gonna play it with mechanical precision.
Yeah, man, unfucking real that band.
Yeah.
Unreal.
So when's your like first band?
Very shortly after, I was in me and my friends started a 3-piece punk band when I was 14, and
Called?
Without Influence.
All right.
Good name.
But heavily influenced, I'm sure.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. And who are you influenced by? Minor Threat.
Oh, definitely Minor Threat.
Yeah.
We all love Minor Threat.
Who the
But,
fuck doesn't?
yeah, but like just like no one knew. It was like the Shags, where like no one knew anything about their respective instrument at all.
Yeah.
No one, like guitar player didn't know any chords, didn't know about power chords. Like
Right.
drummer certainly didn't know anything about
Anything beyond
Yeah, that would have been.
Yeah.
And
Would have been
this
solid.
was like seriously, it was the Shag.
But you're 14.
Yeah.
Right. You know, like the expectations are low. at
Oh,
that
yeah.
age.
Do you have any recordings of that stuff anywhere?
Not anymore. No,
You just got rid of them.
no. We did like a small run of like demo tapes. I think we did 10 or something like that, and we did them on these cassettes that our drummer's dad acquired through his Amway account
Nice.
because he was heavily into Amway, and fortunately, those Amway cassettes maybe lasted like 2 plays and then
Really?
they just disintegrated. So
No,
there's
my
no
mom was
record of it.
dating a guy who was heavy into Amway when I was probably in my 10 to 15 age range, you
Mhm.
know, which would, you know, about probably the time you were doing that, you know. So you're 14 Without Influence
Mhm.
does their thing, and then does that last for a while, or are you like,
No. I mean, because my parents were military, we were stationed in Hawaii.
Okay.
That band started when I was like, halfway through my 9th grade year, and then we moved that summer. I moved to Washington, so we got stationed at Fort Lewis, and then I spent like a year trying to find people to play music with.
yeah?
Couldn't find anyone, and then
Are you saying Washington State or DC?
Washington State.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were just like an hour south of Seattle.
Okay.
And this is like 1992, so it's like
Okay.
the height of grunge, and then I can't find anyone to play music with.
Because everybody wants to play grunge and get away from the punk thing.
No, I mean, just I couldn't find anyone that played guitar or drums like in high school. It was
Yeah.
a different time.
Interesting.
And then about a year later, at the start of my 11th grade year, I met the guys who would go on to be Botch, and we started playing, and yeah, that was that.
Nice. Do you you said are both your parents in the military?
Just my dad.
And what branch of the military? I'm just curious.
Army.
And do you have like fond positive memories of that, or are you like, I hate moving from Hawaii to Washington to
Oh, I
whatever?
definitely hated moving from Hawaii to Washington. That was a major bummer.
Yeah.
Culture shock.
But I mean, we were lucky because we were stationed in Hawaii for 10 years. So
Wow.
kindergarten through my first year of high school was all Hawaii, and we lived off base. We lived in Kailua, which now is kind of like a big tourist destination, but back then it was
Yeah.
just a sleepy beach town.
And this is like towards the tail end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
like 82 to 92.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like, what was that like? Like living like that much closer, you know?
Closer to what?
Well, like the Reds.
In Hawaii?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking like geographically, just west. You know,
Okay.
not so much north, obviously.
I
But just,
mean, you know, for me, it was just like, it was more, the cultural threat was more just being a white kid with the last name of Cook living
Yeah.
in Hawaii. It was just like, oh, this is weird. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you start learning Hawaiian history, and it's like, I'm not related to Captain Cook. Maybe I am. I don't know,
oh,
yeah.
But I mean, you said you didn't like the move away from there. So at some point, you really grew to love the place, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was like this element of excitement to move to the mainland because by that point I was listening to punk music, and I got to see a few things in Hawaii. I got to see Fugazi and
Oh, really?
wow.
Nice.
Social Distortion and Pantera, Dinosaur Jr. But you know, it was kind of like one of those things where like any band from the mainland that came over, you went to go see them just because
Yeah.
like it was such a rare opportunity.
Well, and everything's fairly close to each other in Hawaii, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
nothing's far away.
Yeah.
Right. So then you go back to Washington State. You in high school. All right. It's junior, senior year. You're like, am I going to college? I'm going to do the band thing. Like, did you have an outlook when you're like ending your high school career on what your path was going to be?
I mean, that's when Botch started, right?
Yeah, so Botch started my junior year. We were doing shows pretty soon after. I mean, by the time I was a senior, like I didn't go to my senior prom because we were playing a show
Yeah.
with some touring bands. So that was like a pretty busy thing. But you know, it was a hardcore band, so I didn't think it was going to be a career path
Right.
or anything like that. And I didn't even really want it to be a career path just because I would have been selling out
Right.
forever.
Were they already writing stuff like when you came into the fold, or you just sort of met each other and you just all started from scratch together?
It was pretty much from scratch. They had like one or two songs that they'd kind of been working on, but I think they only had maybe one or two practices before I showed up. And we didn't even have Dave Verellen singing yet. So
Yeah.
I was like the third person to join up. And, yeah, I always joke because it was like the first practice, and first thing was like Dave coming over. And he's like, all right, we're playing drop D, so give me your bass. Hand it over to him, and he like turns the E knob down. I was like, oh, this just like screwed up my whole.
You can't do that. That's
What?
illegal.
And then they started playing Helmet, in the meantime or whatever. And it's like, oh, that's how they played those chords so
Right.
fast because it's all one finger. Okay.
Right.
Well,
I didn't know I could go that low.
Yeah.
Right? Like I kept sliding up to the D.
Yeah, that's where it starts, right?
yeah. I mean, I didn't even really know about power chords at that point. I was still just so green that I just thought like, you listen to metal, like they were going through like, cowboy chords really fast. It's like,
Right.
I'll never be able to do that. That's crazy. Just an E major to like a D major. Like, how do you even do that? That's nuts.
Can you imagine like just trying to practice like that sort of thing at that speed?
Yeah.
Right.
That would be nuts. I mean, there's people out there who are doing that.
We're doing it for
Yeah, it's
sure.
like, I could do Smoke on the Water with the cowboy chords. Like, that's fun. Like, in the meantime.
I
no
bet
way.
that sounds pretty awesome. Like pretty lovely. Like just all open. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. Just jazzy. So yeah, like that sound like Botch, that there was really, I mean, I can't really think of really much like that, especially like with like the way that like Dave would play around with like feedback and like harmonic type sounds and like
Mhm.
big stuff. Like what was the big influence behind that? Was just in his head, your
Yeah,
head?
I think so. I mean, when we started, it was just like it was grunge stuff. I mean, that was kind of the big thing. I was maybe a little more into punk and whatnot, and there was some shared interest in that realm. But I think Dave was more about like Soundgarden and Metallica and stuff like that. And we started going to shows and went and saw some hardcore bands together pretty early on, and that was just like, oh, well, this is the coolest thing ever.
Who was the standout right then?
The big band locally was this band Undertow,
Mm.
who were just kind of like a heavy metallic hardcore band, but you know the shows were just like these chaotic,
Yeah.
you know, just people on top of people.
Is this like the first time you're seeing that sort of thing?
Yeah, because I mean, you know,
What would that feel like?
oh, dude, it was like transformative because you know I'd seen like Pantera, so I'd seen bands where there's pits and people stage diving, and I loved that, but this was more like, you know, the band's on the same level as the audience, like everyone knows all the words, like the microphone's getting passed around, and it's like the audience is as much a part of the show as the band. And I think, you know, as a teenager, that's really exciting, and
Yeah.
I wanted a part of that. And
And there's an element of danger there too.
oh yeah, yeah,
Because like at any moment, like a foot could just completely dislocate your jaw.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's what makes it awesome, Mark.
I mean, I
It
think,
makes it hardcore.
Very cool.
I mean, I think at that point I'd already, you know, like stage dived and gotten thrown onto the ground and broken a rib. So it was like I knew there was danger, and that's what made
Right.
it exciting. So yeah, like yeah, I wanted to be a part of that. And
That's awesome.
so we got into, you know, kind of heavier hardcore stuff, and then that kind of led us to discovering stuff like Drive Like Jehu and Nation of Ulysses, which didn't have the same like bottom heavy chuggy power, but more chaotic and
Yeah.
noisy and abrasive, and you know, sort of like unlearning the guitar in some weird way. And I think that played a big role in how Dave played guitar. And
When was I know you're a big NoMeansNo fan.
oh yeah,
When was that? Like when did that cross you? Like I guess cross your
yeah, I was probably still
enter your world.
I was probably still 14 or 15
That's sick.
when I heard that. And
So that was right around when like Wrong came out.
yeah, Wrong had been out for a couple of years. This would have been like 91 or 92.
Mm.
And I think I got the Small Parts Isolated and Destroyed album. And you know, was just kind of super confused because they had like these super fast punk songs, but then there was these like 7-minute long, almost sort of like proggy,
Yeah.
like
There's definitely
anthems.
a like progressive and mathematical element to them.
Yeah. And I mean the bass was such like a central thing there that I think right off the bat it was just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is
That rips.
Yeah.
That stuff rips.
oh totally.
Have you ever listened to NoMeansNo?
No,
Treat
not
yourself.
familiar.
Oh man.
Some
check it out.
fantastic bass playing, and they just disappeared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were around since like the late 70s, but they just didn't really take off until like the late 80s. And even then it was more like they were bigger in Europe than they were in the States. But the foundation of the band was a drummer and a bass player that were brothers. And they had kind of started off as more like a classically trained,
Clearly listening to Rush.
that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And then they saw The Damned and they're like, oh, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Like turned into like a punk band, but they always had the chops of like these shredders.
Nice.
Yeah.
The bass player wrote everything, so it's the bass is always kind of interesting, and drummer played traditional grip.
Do you find that your playing was influenced by that?
Yeah, definitely.
I can hear it too.
Yeah, I didn't think of it as much as a kid. It wasn't like I want to sound like Rob Wright from NoMeansNo, but once Botch broke up and I started playing in These Arms Are Snakes, no one was really steering the ship creatively. It was just kind of like we'd show up to band practice and everyone would just kind of jam. And we just kind of hoped to stumble across an idea that worked. And it wasn't really working. So I was like, well, I'll just try writing songs and bringing them in to see how that goes.
Mm.
And the only reference point I had for how that stuff worked was NoMeansNo.
Yeah.
So it turned into a lot of NoMeansNo worship that only a few people have ever picked up on it, but it's definitely a big part of that band for me, at least.
And I have picked up on it.
Yeah.
Like when you had posted something about like the anniversary pressing of Wrong, and I was like, I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew he was. I mean, how can you not be? As soon as you hear it.
Well, it's funny because none of the other guys in Snakes, I think, even really knew who they were. But we briefly had this drummer, Aaron Tate from Minus the Bear, filled in for an album, and Aaron was a NoMeansNo fan, and we just kind of had this like, we had this look where like it's a NoMeansNo part, like oh man,
That's always a fun look. Like when like you're writing something and you just sort of like look at the drummer and you're like, all right, follow me real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
And they just know,
Yeah.
you know.
these guys, they don't know what's going on, but,
Yeah.
but we know.
Yeah,
so.
this is for us.
Yeah.
This is for daddy.
Mm-hmm.
So you so Botch breaks up 2002,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then did Themes, Arms, or Snakes just happen like right after that, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was like we had a show in like February of 2002, and we were kind of struggling. We've been struggling for about a year, just trying to write new songs, and everyone's paths were kind of diverging at that point, as it happens in adulthood. And,
didn't Dave Verellen become a firefighter?
Yeah, he was becoming a firefighter. Dave Knudsen had started Minus the Bear.
Which is a total left turn.
Yeah.
There's like some like cool. I mean, My Spirit's incredible, but there's like some like elements
Yeah,
in the Botch DNA that just sort of like goes out there. That was a cool band.
yeah. I mean, you can definitely, Dave is a very distinctive guitar player.
Yeah.
So it definitely carries over from project to project. But yeah, I mean, we had this show and we had like a band dinner beforehand, and the band broke up at that dinner. So we announced at the show that we were breaking up, and then like Ryan Fredrickson, who played guitar in Snakes and had been in this band that we toured with called Nine Iron Spitfire, just like hit me up afterwards, and he's like, I'm already starting a new band with like this drummer and this other guitar player. Like, why don't you join? It's like,
Awesome.
sure. So
Yeah.
it was, Botch still had an EP to record and another tour to go on before we were officially done. So by that point, I was already playing in These Arms Are Snakes, and there's a little crossover.
Nice. So when you guys announced the breakup, was that the Showbox show that you ended up recording,
No.
or that was later?
Yeah. So the show we announced it at was like at the beginning of that year, and then that show was in June. So we are kind of just like tying up a bunch of loose ends and things like that.
Yeah. Awesome. So you move into These Arms Are Snakes in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Was that also like what's his name? Brian, you said, the singer?
Oh, Ryan
Ryan.
Fredrickson, the guitar player.
Guitar player. So they already had stuff sort of established when you're kind of jumping into that?
Yeah, there was another guitar player originally, this guy, Bill Quimby. And I think it was more kind of like Bill's baby. And he really wanted to do this super mathy, super intricate stuff that was like just more just rote memorization than like groove or riff,
Yeah.
And it was just like, it just felt like every practice we were starting over from scratch, just because none of it was really sticking with anyone. So we had like 3 or 4 practices with that lineup, and I think Bill kind of just gave up and was like, "This isn't. These guys aren't getting it.
They're not. Yeah, they're not gonna do what I need them to do.
Yeah. So
that's not always a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like one practice where he didn't show up. He had to bail last minute, and the rest of us were already down there, and we were like, let's just jam. And then we wrote a song, and it's like, hey, that worked.
Yeah. Did you all like encourage him to leave, or was just a natural?
No. I mean, this was just like, we were all just there waiting for him to show up, and he didn't show up. So I was like, well, I might as well just like jam.
I got this riff. What do you think?
Yeah.
And
it went from, like super technical, heavy math metal to like just jamming on knockoff Zeppelin riffs. And it's like, oh yeah, we all like this.
yeah.
We should just do more of this. And that's where that came from.
Awesome. So you got like basically 5 years of that. There's like 2 records in that time period between once you joined up with Russian Circles, and you were still touring with These Arms Are Snakes beyond that. Like once you joined up, right?
We toured. We were a band for about 7 years. Because we started in 2002, broke up in 2009. We did 3 full lengths and, some singles and EPs and things like that. And then Circle started well, I started playing in circles in 2007, so there's like a couple years of crossover, and yeah, but it was hard to juggle two things, and it just kind of felt like the snake stuff. It was like just it was just like always very touch and go, and we were always sort of just really getting by just barely, just like every tour. It's like, well, if the van doesn't break down, we can maybe pay rent when we get home, and then the van would break down. We're so close.
At that time, are you full-time musicking it, or are you like day gig working at a grocery store or what, like?
That was the thing. It was really tough because, I wanted to I wanted to have a home job just because I didn't like going on tour and just being a nervous wreck about money the whole time.
Right.
That's just a bummer. So I wanted to have a job back at home, but we were touring so much that it was just hard to stay employed.
Right.
And the other guys were all bartenders, so it kind of worked out okay for them. They worked at like the Cha-Cha and stuff like that, where everyone that worked there was in a band, so you just traded shifts and it worked out.
And you scheduled your tours accordingly.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm like just taking weird odd jobs. And
what was the oddest job that you took in that time?
I helped. There was a booking agent in Seattle. She booked Seek and Super Suckers and a few other things, but she built this database of promoters and venues, and she designed this website that you could basically subscribe to, and you could go into it as a beginning artist and like basically build a tour.
Yeah. Is it Indiegogo?
No, it was called Righteous Pursuit.
Nice.
And I think it involved a lot of man hours and a lot of money to get it up and going, and then like people just didn't want to subscribe to it. So
that's such a great idea, and I feel like that model actually would do really well now, because the subscription-based model is so baked into everything now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think just back then it was just like people were just leery enough of it that it just never took off.
Yeah, like subscription-based internet stuff in the 2010 or 2005 or whatever it was. Like people are like, that was the time where it was like
credit card.
Like I'm putting my credit card on the internet.
You need my credit card.
What am I doing here?
That's the good card.
I feel like just the last
that's the good card.
5 to 10 years is where people are like comfortable like doing that kind of thing,
I'm so sorry. I have to pause for a second. So bad.
Mark's gonna pee real quick. Well, that's okay. Give me a moment because my battery's getting low on my recorder here, so I'll roll it everywhere.
So you're picking up odd jobs. This is called the name of the website again was
Righteous Pursuit.
Righteous Pursuit.
Yeah.
And that just sort of phases out.
Yeah, that sort of fizzles out, and but this friend of mine, she also books and manages Hell's Bells, which was they're still around, but all female ACDC tribute band.
Nice.
So like I'm doing like Hell's Bells, like merch inventories and mail order and stuff like that. So
that sounds like fun.
Yeah, I mean, it was super
take
fun.
A moment and just like all appreciate how fucking righteous ACDC is.
Oh yeah,
and was. Like every single song is just so sick.
Yeah.
It's so easy, so simple.
The perfect intro song to anything is Thunderstruck, right?
Oh,
like,
dude.
Yeah.
Just like any baseball game, any boxing match, any whatever, just that fucking.
I mean, that's
I get ready to punch. I punch babies as soon as I do that riff, dude.
Well, that's like the classic thing where it's like I remember when Thunderstruck came out and just seeing that video and hearing the song and being like, that's a really good guitar player. Like that's just so.
Oh, and he does that weird walk while he does it.
But it just seemed like so completely like out of reach of like someone like me. And then 2 years later, it's like just dicking around on a guitar and like accidentally finding it. It's like, it's just
right
hammering on these two strings and going back and this is easy, but still so genius.
Right, but it's like. I mean, it's straightforward, like chords, rock. It's like a simplified rock, but it's so It's just so it's just
on so many of those, like that era of rock music, it's underappreciated how the accents are in interesting places. So
Right.
it sounds so straightforward, but like there's this like backbeat or something where, you know.
I tried so long. Like Pink Floyd is another band that reminds me of that kind of similar, like simple chords that make the most beautiful songs. So there would be times in my life where I'm like learning, like wanting to write songs and like, all right, what do I really love? I really love Pink Floyd. How do I take the 4 simplest chords and make them sound so beautiful and epic? And, you know, like all of Dark Side of the Moon is not, you know, this virtuoso thing that I kind of came up learning or desiring how to play, but also had this love for, you know, Pink Floyd's and ACDC's of the world and stuff like that. And I was just never able to capture the emotion that those guys are able to produce. And that's why they are who they are, and their magic, you know.
Echoes live at Pompeii.
Oh yeah.
When that groove kicks in and it's like that slow pan behind the fucking amps.
Yeah.
And you just see like Roger Waters like close up and that bass tone, you know, on his P bass and the high watts and shit. It just, I chase that sound.
Well, I put that clip on Instagram the other day of I keep wanting to say Angus Young, but who lead singer ACDC
Brian Johnson
going like, well, I didn't know what I was doing, and I'm not, you know, I just thought this was going to be a fun thing and they were going to get bored of me. And then they were like, can you write lyrics? And I said, I'd try. So the first thing I wrote was, she was a fast machine, she kept her motor clean, and she's the best damn woman that I ever. That's the first thing you wrote? That was the beginning. Like,
yeah, just beautiful misogyny.
But well, he was like, I've always been big into cars, you know, and that's women, cars,
kind
put
them
thing,
together,
you know. But like that is a great line, you know.
I mean, there is a certain magic to it. Yeah,
I think there is. I think there is for sure.
I didn't know that he had such range as well. Like he was in a band prior to ACDC.
Yeah.
Where he's like a much deeper singer. And in fact, there was this like, I guess it's a compilation record that Slash put together, and he brings in a bunch of all-stars and stuff like that, and he pulls Brian Johnson in on one of them to sing. And I'm like, that's him? It's like deeper and like bluesier, and it's just like I had no idea that was him.
It's like when you discovered the Bee Gees had a whole pre-disco catalog. It's like, oh, they didn't always sing like that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think we should then, like, now the next logical evolution is Russian Circles. They do the album in Seattle. You just so happen to be there.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, how did they know about you?
We crossed paths on tour a bunch. I mean, we had like a bunch of the same friends, and like, you know, I mean, I first heard Russian Circles because my buddy David Lewis, who had done PR for These Arms Are Snakes, sent me their demo. It's like, you should check out this new Chicago band.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, they're cool. And then, you know, a few months later, we're playing with them in Springfield, Missouri, or something like that.
Cool.
And then they wound up on Suicide Squeeze Records, and These Arms Are Snakes were on Suicide Squeeze Records.
That's Jason Gagowski?
No, that's you're thinking of Hawthorne Street.
Hawthorne Street. He had a band though called, was it just Suicide Note?
Suicide Note, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Suicide Squeeze was out of Seattle, and they mainly did like indie rock stuff. They did like Modest Mouse and Elliott Smith singles and things like that.
No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah.
Just these little,
some of the most influential
like
singers and bands ever.
Yeah. But back when, you know, they were just doing 7 inches and things like that.
Yeah.
And then,
Fun stuff. Like that.
But so I kind of met them through that, and was like, oh, this band's cool. I like the guys. Like, I helped a friend move to New York, moved to New York from Seattle, and we drove cross country, and we needed a place to stay in Chicago, so we stayed at Mike's house and, you know, hung out late and got drunk and listened to records, and like, oh yeah, I like these guys. So when found out they needed a bass player. It's just like, oh, yeah, I can help out with that.
Yeah.
I'd filled in for some other bands when they were down a member. And so I always liked playing with different musicians just because I felt like you get a new perspective and you always wind up learning something. And,
Yeah.
you know.
What were some of the other bands that you ended up sitting in with around that time?
I did a record for this band, Mouth of the Architect, who were like a heavy kind of like Neurosis meets Mastodon kind of thing.
Sick.
And they'd lost a bass player right before, the tour was, or right before the recording session was booked. And it was another thing where it was happening in Seattle, and my friend was recording the records. I was like, I'll do it. And
Nice. What was the name of the album?
The Ties That Blind.
The Ties That Blind.
Yeah.
I'll check that out.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I as a friend, like, I'm not ashamed to admit that, like, I think that, like, everything that you touch is, you just have good taste. Like, you have, like,
Thanks.
the band. I was gonna say you piss greatness, which is also true, but like you like. I'll see something that comes out and your name will pop up as the project or being involved in the project. I'm like, this is probably going to rip.
Oh.
And it always does.
Well, thank you. That's
Yeah.
nice to hear.
Yeah.
People, bass is like the most underappreciated instrument. So
We're trying to change that.
Yeah.
We're on a mission to change
We're
that.
the nerds.
We're all here
bringing
for
it.
it.
So,
forefront.
so I know Russian Circles had a band prior, and I think it was Colin and Mike who had Dakota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so they're from like the St. Louis area, is that right?
Yeah. So Mike and Dave are both from St. Louis. I don't know where Colin was from. I don't know if I think he was just Chicago. But yeah, Mike had moved up to go to school at DePaul, and they'd had like a punk band in high school together. But that broke up, and Mike went off to college and started Dakota, and then Dave stayed behind in St. Louis, and he was in a band called Riddle of Steel for a little while. And fun fact is I booked a Riddle of Steel show back in 2003, and I worked at a youth center that did shows, and so I booked his band. But yeah, I think eventually Riddle of Steel kind of fizzled out, and I think there might have even been like a Riddle of Steel Dakota split 7-inch. I might be making that up though.
Yeah.
We can consult Discogs later and find out. But, at some
Look
point,
it up, nerds.
Yeah, at some point they reconvened, and Dave moved to Chicago, and they started Russian Circles, and
Yeah. Nice.
yeah,
Just wrote some of the most epic cinematic.
yeah.
Well, so I have a question about Russian Circles. Like, I've watched a lot of interviews. Honestly, this past week, just kind of prepping for this sit down, and obviously, you guys get a lot of the "Why isn't there a singer in the band?" And that's not the question I have for you, because I understand the reason you don't have a singer is the same reason you don't have a saxophone player. Like,
Right.
just makes it different,
Yeah.
right? It's not what it is. But has anybody ever reached out to you of prominence to go like, I'd love to sing on a song of yours?
Well, we did one song with Chelsea. We did a song with Chelsea Wolfe singing, but that was like a thing that we had kind of coordinated together. But there was a point in time back in the MySpace era where someone started something called, I'm probably getting this wrong, but I think it was called Anthony's Russian Circles Project. I might have that wrong. But they had like a MySpace page where he was singing over a Russian Circle song, and it was kind of like this kind of Maynard-y, like,
sure,
like very tension building vocal thing, but it was all about like stalking a woman and like all this stuff. We're like, this is what you got out of it? Like,
all right, we're wrapping it up. We're changing everything now.
This is our guy.
Yeah.
That's
not what I meant. I meant like, oh, this is who we're in.
It's like,
well, because like, maybe it's just me, because like sometimes I like you guys, Pelican, I love instrumental bands. I'm a big fan of like cinematic orchestra, and they have some songs with vocalists that they guest star on or whatever you want to feature. But like specifically with like Russian Circle, sometimes I'm like zoning out on what you guys are playing, and I'm at times imagining a Maynard singing over it, or just like weird different vocalists that I think would suit the music. But then I also ultimately get to the conclusion that like, but that changes what it is so much, you know? And it's like, well, it's this thing, and you guys hit this nerve that nobody else is. I mean, not nobody, but like you have your own kind of lane, and it's this like, I was listening to an interview with the guitar player. What's his name? Mike. And he's like, a lot of the band, it, gives me feedback of like, less is more. You don't need to be riffing all the time, and it helped develop this sound that is, in some cases, repetitious, but constantly like morphing and evolving slowly, which like, and then that coupled with like, I think, you guys have this general like thought that like a lot of the magic also is in the live situation. Like you should be experiencing this music live, which is just like, it's just another avenue of being a band. Like you could see the live aspect is also like, there's a music video aspect, and there's this other, like all these little puzzle pieces that make your band what it is. And I understand like not having a vocalist even feature on a song or two, because then like, how do you repeat that live, right? Like you want this to be experienced in person. So like, when I was, Mark took a brief break to use the lavatory, and we were chatting for a second. And
I muted the mic, so there's no audio of that.
I noticed last time he did that too. I was lining up audio and stuff, and I was like, what this big block of no sound? Oh, that must have been where he was taking
Leslie Nielsen and the Naked Gun. There.
Those movies roll, by the way.
Oh man, yeah.
So I was explaining how I was like listening to some Russian Circles in the past few days, and I was then showing it to Kendall, and her big thing was, I think your guys' kind of message about having a vocalist or not having a vocalist is like, well, I probably wouldn't enjoy this music as much if there was a vocalist, because then I played some other stuff for her, and I was like, well, it's kind of like this. And it's like, yeah, I can't listen to this because that vocalist is like taking me out of what was awesome about this, you know? So also like, so then we're like watching it on YouTube on my beautiful 75-inch TV. But then I was like, but now wait a minute. Imagine seeing this in concert, like being there, feeling the kicks in your chest and like feeling the volume of it. Like, just imagine how much the next level that this takes that to,
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it's funny for me because, and this maybe ties back to being a hardcore kid, but it was always about the live experience. And it was like, hardcore records are cool, but like you listen to hardcore so you can go to the hardcore show and, clobber each other and have that experience. And so much of what I'm drawn to in music is either about how it translates live or me envisioning what it must have been like live when it's like, people all in a room fleshing out a song together and stuff that's like I like some electronic music, but I've just never gotten as heavily into that world because it doesn't have that same like thing of people like feeding off of each other, and it doesn't have like the same how did this come about? Like with these four people in a room, throwing ideas at each other. It's like more a music that's more just focused on composition, and it's like written and recorded, and then it's done. Doesn't like trigger the same pleasure center in my brain as like, it doesn't matter if it's disco or if it's, reggae or death metal. If it's like, if there's something about it that like conveys the power or the magic of these people like all being in a room together, cranking it out, like it just doesn't like that's why I listen to music. That's probably, you know, a symptom of being a musician, where I'm just so entrenched in like the process of things, where if the process doesn't somehow relate to what I'm doing, it doesn't seem as interesting, or it's just so mysterious where it's like, well, yeah, I don't know how you do that thing on
Right.
your laptop to make that sound, but like that sounds like working on a laptop, and I'm not as
Right.
excited by that. So
Well, there's definitely bands that like, you know, I've listened to and then seen them live, and the show may be great and they may have performed well, but I don't know that the live experience has heightened the experience.
Yeah.
You know, and I think Russian Circles definitely does heighten that experience when you're live, you know, and it's like just everybody in the room feeling everything, you
Yeah.
know. And then when you have this like, you know, this like slowly transitioning music that just builds and builds and builds and builds, it's just like that is a thing that comes across really well in a live scenario,
Yeah.
you know. So I know you guys just played the Metro, which I sadly did not make that show. So how was the Metro show?
It was good. It was
Yeah.
fun. You know, it was the only thing I would say is we have been doing this for however many years. I mean, it was like our 20-year anniversary show, and it's like we've been doing this for 20 years, and we still like forget to book a warm-up show somewhere in a small venue. It's like you still want to go straight to like playing the Metro,
Right.
like in your hometown to all your friends, and you know. So I think there was some nerves and some jitters and a little bit of
Really?
yeah.
I would expect to be in a room full of your friends, like would kind of
Well, when was the last show
friends
prior
who are
to
also
that,
fans.
Yeah.
would just sort of like put you in more at ease.
I think so. Yeah, sort of, but at the same time, it's like we haven't played a show in the U.S. since 2022. You know, it's like
Okay.
so it's like, you know, gear that we've always played on, but we haven't played on it in 2 years, and you know,
Rehearsal is different than an
rehearsal's
actual
different,
show.
and we don't live in the same states, so it's
Yeah.
like we don't rehearse until we're getting ready to go on tour, and then it's like, you know, 3 days of cramming, and
Right.
you know, so you don't have like quite the same level of muscle memory and intuition and flow that you do if you're 3 weeks into tour.
Well, by the end of the run, you guys will have it down.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
we'll get to New York and we'll feel pretty good about it, and then we'll go home and yeah.
How was the Juna? I know they were opening this show.
Oh, she's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Donna's she's awesome.
yeah.
Listen, I should be your bass player.
Yeah.
She didn't need it.
She doesn't need it.
That was the coolest fucking thing. Seeing like, I think she put out like a video like live at, like in studio,
Mhm.
and like it was when she was playing with her first drummer, like before,
Mhm.
and now she's just doing completely solo.
Yeah.
Oh, she didn't have a drummer?
Yeah,
Mhm.
but so it's all backing tracks now. But like just seeing that like interplay and these like
Yeah.
really cool sounds and just like very distinctive vocal style, it's just like I was like, oh yeah, that's it. That's
No, great. You're
I'm
doing a
giving up.
great job.
Yeah.
But if you ever
Just
decide
replace me with a
that you need a
Taurus.
bass
Yeah.
player and you don't want to press foot pedals anymore,
No.
let me know. I'd be happy to audition for
I mean, that's the like what she does is it's so impressive, because it's like, I mean, she's doing everything. You know,
Right.
she's like doing the Taurus with her feet, she's playing guitar, and she's singing.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, look at me, I'm doing 3 things at once.
She's doing it.
It's like, oh, you're like doing it very well, and the song is just great. You
Right.
know, so it's like there's a lot of musicians out there that can do like all kinds of wizardry, but it's like, yeah, I don't really remember the song though.
Right.
And it's like, no, but your songs are solid too. So it's just like,
Yeah.
god damn, it's
Nice.
impressive.
Are you guys doing you guys played with Pelican.
Mhm.
Are you guys all touring together, or was this just the Chicago show?
Just the Chicago show. Juna's going out with us. We have like another 4 or 5 shows together.
Okay.
And I think we're going to try and do some dates with Pelican in the future, but you know, it's just tricky because, you know, they're all dads and,
Right.
you know, full-time job people, and that's tricky to coordinate. But you know, we owe a lot to Pelican just because they were friends from the beginning, and they were pretty instrumental in helping us get shows early on.
Yeah.
Instrumental, pun intended, because they're also an instrumental band.
Mhm.
Well, like when I was mentioning in the mid 2000s when bandmates were like, "Hey, check this out," then that like quickly was like, "Oh, in this band Pelican, you should, if you're
Yeah.
into this, you're going to be into this too."
Yeah.
So was a fan of that. Whatever, almost 20 years ago, I'd say at this point.
Yeah.
So
So-
like, what's the next year look like for Russian Circles?
Man, I don't know.
I mean, I know you got this tour. You guys got like 10 dates or something like that, right?
Yeah, not even. I think it's like, yeah, maybe 6 or 7.
Right,
Yeah.
6 to 8 or whatever it is.
And then we do Europe in October into November. And then I think we're going to go out and do some US dates early next year, but that's still being figured out. And then, and then I think it's time to write another record. So,
do you anticipate the writing of the next record? Because I was listening, I don't know if it was the Audio Tree or something else, where like, seems like the writing process changed a little bit during COVID,
Mhm.
right? Do you anticipate the next album kind of being a similar process, or like we're gonna all lock ourselves in a room and just work stuff out?
well, it used to be that, Mike and Dave both lived in Chicago. And so when I started playing with them, they'd still go down to the practice space 2 or
Yeah.
3 times a week and work on songs. And then they'd send demos, and I'd come out for a week at a time here and there, and we'd work on things together. And then Mike moved to LA in 2015 or 16. And so then it was, we'd still do the thing where we'd fly in and rehearse for a week here and there, but there wasn't like the same skeleton of a song. So it was a
Yeah.
lot more really trying to piece songs together, like as the three of us in these like really short, isolated bursts of time. And, that worked. But I think a lot of that was just like Mike writing riffs or short song fragments, and then we just try and kind of piece them together in the practice space. And
Yeah.
that process works. I mean, that's how like early Metallica records came together.
Sure,
So
right.
that's great. But with Gnosis and everyone being in lockdown, we were just doing songs like as entire compositions individually and then submitting them to the band, and people would write over, full compositions. And I think that was just more fluid
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. I think it allowed Mike and I to both get sort of like whole ideas presented. And yeah, I just think it's like an easier process. It's nice when everyone has a hand in songwriting and you can kind of contribute ideas and fuck with arrangements. And we can still do it that way when we submit entire songs, compared to just like cobbling things together out of bits and pieces. But yeah, I think it's just smoother, and I think it kind of allows people to get like a bigger vision put forth. And
Sure.
yeah, so I'm hoping we just kind of continue working that way. I love the whole thing of just like getting together in a room and banging it out and just
Sure.
trying to capture that lightning in a bottle thing. But I think just as I've gotten older, it's like it's also nice just to be able to sit in the comfort of your house and
Right.
stew over an idea for a while and not feel like, okay, I got to come up with an idea right now because
Yeah,
everyone's
the
looking at
pressure.
me, and
Right.
it's like being
Is
able
this cool? Is this cool?
Yeah, yeah.
Are you proud of me?
yeah. And I mean, so much of like working with Mike and Dave's so funny because those guys will just workshop until the song's like recorded. They'll just continually refine and work on things. And I'd always just sort of been in bands where you jammed and you just
Right.
figured it out from jamming a part
I
through.
had no idea you were such a hippie.
Total hippie. I thought that's how you did it. Like that's Fugazi, Drive Like Jehu, and like no one wrote songs. They like
Right.
got in a basement and
Yeah,
made shit up. And
Right.
it's one way to do it.
yeah.
So you like around writing and recording Gnosis, you also came out with a solo record with Torment
Yeah.
and Glory.
Mhm.
Was that like, were those songs sort of just already sort of like in your mind or like recorded somewhere else? And then you just were like, hey, I'm writing these full compositions and I'm going to put it out there. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I've always lived in apartments for the most part. And so having like a 810 and 200-watt tube amp in an apartment just doesn't work. So if I want to just make music in my living room, it's always been guitar stuff, and usually acoustic guitar just because it's quiet and easy. And so just over the years, I've just sort of compiled little song fragments or arrangement ideas, and then during COVID, it's like, might as well record these. And if anything, it was just like, I'm so tired of, I've been playing some of these guitar parts for like
Right.
10 years just because it's
Right.
like,
And then on top of that, playing in bands that were just like loud, intense,
yeah.
and or at least get that way. Like that's like where like all of it kind of ends up going.
Yeah.
I mean, did it feel like refreshing to just kind of focus on?
Yeah. it was honestly, it was like really therapeutic because it was also COVID. And, I think there's also there's a little bit of like worst case scenario. It's like, what if society collapses and the grid goes down and there's no more
I
music?
fucking miss that feeling.
Yeah.
I miss it. Just like you go into the grocery store and then like somebody like sneezes and then just all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Everything's just like, you're definitely living in the moment constantly.
It never happened though. I mean, like in some ways it did, but it didn't happen in the way that like
Yeah.
I think we were hoping.
You're hoping.
Nothing that we
I
couldn't
mean,
come
like,
back
yeah,
from.
all of my
and-
person.
Survivalist friends and with the
Yeah.
bunkers.
No, I mean me like personalities in there.
Yeah.
So it definitely feels like a very deeply personal record. Like would you agree?
Yeah. I think it was just is I think it was partially just I want to make music that can exist outside of like a band framework, that can exist like the root of the song and the core of the song is just something that you can do on an acoustic guitar and with a voice, and like that was really appealing. But I think there's also just a lot of really wanting to feel like completely in control of something, just because the 2 years leading up to COVID, it was like I'd moved cross country, I was trying to figure out a place to live. The band was on tour all the time, and it was just like, I don't know what my life is anymore. And not like in a bad way where I'm like complaining about it, because I think I was still a very happy person in general, but like definitely feeling like, it's great to be a musician, but I'm still having to ask people if I can go pee, like
Right.
you always want to have a job where it's like, you don't have to like ask your boss if you can take a bathroom break. But if you're in a van all the time, then it's like, hey guys,
Yeah.
Right.
can you pull over?
Stop at the next Love's truck stop.
It's just like
What's your favorite truck stop?
Loves.
Is it Love's?
Oh man, you
Loves,
took one of my
Pilot,
I was holding
Flying
on.
J, TNA. TNA is definitely at the bottom.
I was holding on to that one for the rapid fire.
fire.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but we all know that Buc-ee's is one, right?
Buc-ee's is great, but man, Buc-ee's is like so like
Such a distraction.
it's such a distraction. You pull up to it, and it's just like there's already way too many people.
Their songs, they have like their own jingles inside.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
it's a thing. I like Buc-ee's, but yeah, Loves
Right.
Loves is at the top. Best branding, at least.
You fucking Yankee.
So
Love's is-
where are you? Where's home now?
Seattle.
Seattle.
Yeah,
Back in Washington State, huh?
yeah.
You and Reno bought the cutest little house. I love that
We
place.
lucked the fuck out. Yeah.
It's so gorgeous. I mean, I see photos all the time on
Yeah.
Instagram, and
It's tiny. It's a very small house, but
I wouldn't guess. I mean, like it looks like just a very like lovely home.
yeah. No, we're super stoked. We really lucked out. Like,
So when you were moving, you lived in Washington for a long time, and then you and Reno moved out to New York.
Yeah.
Is that right?
yeah.
And then another cross country move back to Seattle.
Yep.
And in that time frame when you moved, that's right around when you started up with Sumac. Is that right?
Sumac started, I think, around 2014. So I had just moved to New York, because we moved there end of 2012, beginning of 2013. And yeah, Aaron and I had known each other for a long time, and we'd become coffee buddies for a couple years prior to moving to New York. We'd meet up every so often and get coffee and talk music and whatnot. And we both kind of had ideas for like one-off musical projects that we do together. And there was sort of some overlap in our ideas, but you know, Aaron was much better at acting on his ideas. Like I wasn't leading the charge on anything. And he's like, yeah, I've got these songs. I've got this drummer in Canada I want to work with. And so they just recorded this record in Seattle, but I was already in New York at that point, and they just sent me an hour of really confusing music that I had to decipher. And
It goes on a journey.
Yeah.
Like every record.
yeah, it just gets crazier and crazier. But yeah, it was like the first record. It's like I don't even know what this music is, but I guess we'll see when it's done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until it was all tracked and mixed that I was like, oh, like now I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is cool. And you know, again, I think it was meant to be a one-off recording project, but there's enough sort of mutual enthusiasm about it. It's like, well, we'll try and play some shows, and then next thing you know, there's like another record and tours, and it's kind of turned into a real thing.
Awesome. Yeah. I remember seeing you guys at the bottle, an empty bottle, and
Oh yeah,
I was like, yeah, this is so. There's like almost like an avant-garde element to it.
oh yeah,
And the newest record, like it's pretty like highly acclaimed, like right out of the gate.
yeah.
And-
Weirdly surprising. But
But you all did something in Los Angeles fairly recently. You played some festival. Was there like a collaboration between you all and somebody else?
yeah, I mean, you know, a part of that band's thing is having some improvisational components, and you know, trying to do sort of this free form spontaneous composition stuff. And I think a lot of that kind of comes from Aaron's time doing noise music. He's always had some noise projects and music that's more textural based as opposed to melody or rhythm.
Mm.
So we've kind of wanted to incorporate some of that. And then, you know, almost from the very beginning, I think there was an idea for him. Once we kind of knew it was going to be an ongoing project, he was really into the idea of it having a collaborative component where outside people could kind of come in and we could sort of see what happens. So we did a couple of records with Keiji Haino, the Japanese avant-garde musician. We did a couple of live shows with Casper Brotzman, who was Peter Brotzman's son, and who did Casper Brotzman Massacre, which was, you know, a band that was influential to Botch when we were starting. We've done some live collaborations with Alan Dubin from Con Aid. And then, and then in LA, we did a collaboration with our friend Zachary and our friend Patrick as like a 5-piece. And yeah, it was pretty cool. We recorded it. I don't know if we're ever going to do anything with it, but we'll see.
That's so great, because like music that ends up getting so like heavy and loud, it's often not really it doesn't really enter the world of improvisation so much, at least these days. And so it's definitely a refreshing take on just what heavy music can be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be limited to like just these parts or loud, quiet, loud, and everything. It's really cool. Like this, like you had mentioned, like there's like a sort of jazz like element to it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's just tricky because, you know, with loud down-tuned guitars, it can turn into mud real quick. And sometimes it does. I mean, that's something that
and just playing in the mud.
Yeah,
you know,
sometimes
just
it happens.
There's a Young Widows lyric, dance with dogs and felt the freedom of filth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's a very like freeing thing.
Yep.
To do that. And I'd imagine it forces you to really listen, especially at like that volume, that frequency.
Yeah, and that's, we did one of the records we did with KG Hino was a live record we did together there's a live performance we did in Tokyo, and it was like a train wreck because we sound checked before the show, and then Sumac played a set, and then we went off stage, and then we came back with KG Hino, and there was just enough reconfiguration of amps and then monitor setups where all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, like everything we did during sound check to accommodate as a 3-piece now is
Out the window.
With a 4-piece configuration. And so it was just like a lot of like, I can't hear what Aaron's doing, so I don't know if this is working. I don't know if what I'm doing is matching up with Hino-san, and it was kind of a mess. So I think we all got off stage and we're just like, that was bad. But Aaron and our buddy Randall Dunn took the tapes and kind of went through it, and like, no, there's some stuff here, and they kind of culled through all the material and put together a record. And it's hard for me to listen to because it's like I can't divorce myself from how it felt in the moment.
Yeah.
But I've had like weird moments, like listening to like a streaming app, and all of a sudden it kind of randomly comes up in the algorithm's queue, and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is
I did that.
This is that record that I don't want to ever listen to. I feel weird about it. But
Does your stomach turn after you realize it's you?
well, then I'm always like, okay, I'm glad this exists in the world. Like I'm glad it's
Right.
out there, but
Yeah.
it's just like it's
Yeah,
for
it
other
makes you
people.
feel better about it, right?
Yeah, it's
You
not for me.
appreciate it and then discover something you did.
Yeah, I'm like,
Like that feels good. Maybe I was overreacting to it.
I'm awesome.
yeah. Turns out,
Right.
We knew.
Yeah.
And you know too. So you guys, so after this tour with Russian Circle, I mean, like you've from afar, like it seems like you're a very busy guy, like constantly on the road, constantly doing some sort of project and stuff like that.
yeah,
Like
it's been busy.
past few years, COVID withstanding, like out of that. But like how many days at home, like how many weeks at home do you anticipate like you have on average?
I mean, it used to be, it was like I'd maybe be on tour for 3 or 4 months out of the year. This year it's been pretty hectic, but generally like the days of doing like 6-week, 7-week tours are just past me now,
Yeah. Do you think that's a trend just like universally or just specific to you and Russian circles? And
I think just for my bandmates and I think we're all just sort of like, we can't do that. Like the last tour we had planned pre-COVID was a European tour that was 6 weeks. And like we literally aborted mission the morning we were supposed to fly to Europe because it was March 2020. And that's when like,
Yeah.
our agent's like, all your Italian shows are definitely canceled.
Right.
that was scary.
The good news is that you sold 1,000 tickets in Paris, but the bad news is that France no longer lets you have more than 500 people in a room together.
Right. So your 1,000 is now 2 dates.
Yeah. It's like,
Was that like a huge sigh of relief not having to do that tour? I mean, like outside of like how scary things were in the world, but like there's this element of like, man, it's a massive 6-week tour.
I was so excited for that too because it was with Torch, and
Oh man,
and like again, like the pre-sales were all really strong. I was like, this is going to be great. And then
that would have been fun.
I had my bags packed. Our tour manager was already on the plane, first leg of his itinerary. And we just had this phone call, and I just remember just being like, I think this is a mistake, but
Not going was a
not
mistake?
going. Yeah. I was like, better safe than sorry. And then within 24 hours, it was like,
Everything's getting shut
oh
down.
yeah, it was like
There's
the
nothing-
pivotal 24 hours. Where it's like, oh, thank God we didn't do that. Like,
Yeah, you would have been stuck over there
Yeah.
probably.
within 24 hours, like almost everyone's tours were canceled. So
Yeah.
like, I know Chelsea Wolf was over there, and we had a couple other friends that were over there that were scrambling to get home. So it was just like, we dodged a bullet, but we didn't like cancel the tour. We just kept rebooking it. So our booking agent booked that tour like 4 or 5 times. It's like, maybe things will be fine in 6 months. We'll book it again. And
Mhm.
nope, booked it again. And finally, we went out on the tour like 2 years later. And then by that time, it's like, why are we doing a 6-week tour? This is our first tour back, and it's 6 weeks. It was just like, it was too long. And we're just like, okay, we're not doing this anymore. Like
And
a month tops.
And in that time, you wrote Gnosis.
Yeah.
And that 6-week tour was just basically touring Gnosis. Is that right? Is that right?
Well, because I mean, it was supposed to be the headlining tour on the previous album, Blood Year, because we hadn't been to Europe. We had done the UK, but we hadn't done mainland Europe on that album yet. Because Blood Year had only been out maybe 4 or 5 months at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, in that time we wrote and recorded Gnosis. And then we went back to Europe, and it's like, well, now we still have to play these Blood Year songs and do service to that record, but the other one was already done and off of the pressing plants. And then, yeah, the shit that's not interesting to other people, but for us, it's just like, well, now we fucked ourselves because we can't come back to Europe for at least another year.
Yeah.
But the new album's going to come out in like 2 months.
Right.
And then now what? It's like, it throws off the whole.
But you all are at a point
cycle
now with enough releases and enough of a fan base that you could like literally just put a set together of what you want to play, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine Sargent House wants you to like actively promote whatever record is out there and like give service to that. But like, do you feel like you're at a point in your career where you can just, we're just gonna piece a set together that we feel like playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fortunate in that, we're not a band that blew up on one record, so it's not like, I don't know, it's not like
Just play the hits.
yeah. It's like everyone seems,
Sustainable growth is what they call that.
it seems very sustainable growth, so that's nice. So we can kind of, I mean, if anything, we feel compelled to like. Now it's like we have 8 or 9 records, and it's like, oh, we got to play something off of every record, I guess. But that alone is a full set. So,
well, and then you said you guys
that
are
would be
going
9 songs,
Yeah.
one from each record. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
You're going to Europe soon, right?
Yeah.
How long is that leg?
that's a month.
A month.
So that's like our max thing at this point in time.
Of 30-ish days. How many shows within those 30 days? Are you really like 4 or 5 shows a week, or is it like?
Yeah, I think we try to have like a day off every 4 days or so. Just because we're old. No one wants to squander time and like, you want to be efficient.
Yeah, you're out there. It
and-
costs a lot of money to get everything
Yeah.
going, and
all
I
that
get
stuff.
it.
But man, we have like no days off on a tour.
yeah.
Like I remember we did like a 6-week European tour in 2011 maybe. It was with Def Heaven. We took Def Heaven out before they'd kind of blown up. And I want to say it was like 22 shows in a row. And it was like, it wasn't like, oh, and it's all in Germany where it's easy. It's like, no, this is like through Poland, up into the Baltics, fly in Moscow,
Finish
like
the show at midnight, get on the bus, drive for 6 hours.
Yeah,
To get to the...
and like Mike, the day before the first show, just moving gear around, broke his thumb. So he was playing like this whole tour with like a broken thumb on his fretting hand, and it's like, and there's no days off, so you don't even get to like
Actually heal.
mend. Yeah.
Are you guys doing it all like tour bus the whole time? Like,
Nah, we just do van
so
stuff.
you don't even have a tour bus. You're in a van.
Well, it's not like they're not like a 6-piece band or anything though. There's
Right, it's
Yeah.
just the 3 of you, right?
Yeah.
plus crew.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's always been the thing for us, where it's like if we had 4 or 5 members, I'm sure we would have probably made the jump to a bus way sooner. But it's like it's 3 people, so even if there's 3 crew,
Right.
it's like,
Get a big transit van or something like that.
yeah, we rent from this company that do like sprinters that have a loft. And what we do now usually is we get like a big sprinter, and then we get like a cargo vehicle. So it's like
Right. For the
an
gear and
equipment
everything.
mover and a person mover. Yeah.
Are you guys traveling with any kind of a lighting setup or anything? It's just
Yeah. We have this Swiss guy, John Michael, who we try to travel with as much as possible because he's like a lighting wizard.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
yeah, and then like a sound engineer, tour manager, merch person.
Exciting.
One day there'll be a guitar tech, and it'll be really cool. But I think that's the tipping point where it's like you add one more person, and then you enter the bus zone, and your costs get crazy. And
Oh yeah, it's just not sustainable anymore.
yeah.
Right? Like you're hearing like mega like huge acts, they're like, oh yeah, this is no longer profitable for us,
Yeah.
you know, and that's just insane.
I think it's tough for like bigger bands because at a certain point you lose your scalability. You know, it's like, well, the audience expects this much of a show every time, and if you
Right.
can't provide that, you know, then you're kind of screwed. But
What you got going on over there?
My battery is exhausted, it says.
okay,
Hold on. You give
We
me
got
a
that guy
second.
going too.
Yeah, that
Backup.
one's going. I don't know why. I
I'll take
wonder
a pee break right now. Can
Well,
we do
take a pee break real
Sure.
quick, and then maybe we'll
Yeah,
do
we probably actually
wrap up here. For
actually it's 5. We need
Oh,
to
is it
like
5?
we need to do rapid fire after
Okay,
this, and then
let me just
Yeah.
check my foot real quick.
apologies to Dave as well. He's waiting. Almost done. He's gonna pee real quick. We'll do rapid fire and get out of your hair.
Never had an exhausted battery before.
I'm so tired.
Don't like that one.
So at the at this bachelor party, 2 of the guys are like really great cooks,
Okay.
and they decided they were gonna make wings, and wings just like I fucking love. And we have these Grippo cheese like they're like cheese puffs, but they're barbecue flavored.
Okay.
And that's just like the very stoned fat kid in me was like, what if we made like a dust out of these like Cheeto puffs, these puffs, and then like rolled the wings in there, and dude, holy
Exquisite.
shit. Yeah, that plus this like chili maple sauce, and then another like sprinkling on top. Like we cooked them,
Oh damn!
we made a batter out of it, but then like we like sprinkled on top, and it was just so good.
Hell yeah!
Yeah.
That sounds decadent.
Let's you want to just jump into rapid fire?
Yep. Got a 100% battery. Even
Sweet.
though it was plugged in, it's still.
I think
we
it was just
exhausted
it's
the
probably
battery.
overheating.
Oh, just the fuck is going on here?
Boop. Is Dave outside?
He is, or he said he was going to be here in 10, like 15 minutes ago.
Oopsie.
So I just said I'll be up in 5.
Sorry. Yeah, we talk. We just blah, 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 blah.
I think it's fine. I don't think he's.
We guys going to dinner?
Where?
Yeah.
I think somewhere up north, because a bunch of our guys are at the Hyatt Regency
Nice.
up by the airport. So
All right. Rapid fire questions.
let's do it.
These are. You just pass if there's anything you don't want to answer. First thing that kind of comes to your mind. Most of mine are bass related. Marks are usually food related. So,
Okay,
are you ready?
let's do it.
All right. We'll make sure we're recording here. We are recording. Okay. Active or passive basses?
I've only ever played passive.
Then it's passive. Do you have a favorite fretboard material?
Aluminum.
I think it's the
Right.
first
Yes,
one.
yeah, you're the first one with aluminum. All right. Do you favorite speaker size?
10s.
Okay. Favorite or a couple of your favorite bass players?
Rob Wright from NoMeansNo, Mike Watt from Minutemen Firehose,
Right.
Chris Squire from Yes, Joe Preston from Thrones, and yeah, High and Fire, Melvins, all that stuff.
Very cool. Piece of gear you regret getting rid of?
I didn't necessarily get rid of it, but I had an old Super Fuzz knockoff made by a company called Apollo, and I just was a dumb kid that didn't know how to take care of gear, and I
Right.
just destroyed it, and eventually it was rendered inert.
Hard case or gig bag?
Hard case.
Tube or solid state?
Tube.
Saw that one coming. What's your current rig?
I'm currently using an EGC Series 2 bass,
Which you got back, right?
which I got back after it was stolen. So one of the nice things about having a fancy boutique
Right.
instrument is that when someone tries to sell it to a pawn shop, they're like,
Ding,
you
ding,
don't,
ding.
you don't seem like the kind of person that would have a
Right.
aluminum neck custom.
Is that what's kind of like set off all the alarms?
Mhm.
Is that once that one kind of resurfaced?
Well, no, So we had a bunch of stuff stolen while we were on tour. Most of it was never recovered, but there was a high-speed chase between a cop and some person that ended with the vehicle getting ditched, and they found a microphone case that belonged to our front of house guy in the car, and that traced them to a house where I had a baritone that was recovered, and Mike had a guitar that was recovered.
And that baritone had like the really cool like mud flap design.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was
On
another,
the inlays, right?
yeah, and that was another one where it's like this will show up eventually one day, or it's just been
Right.
buried because someone knows it's a red flag.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was recovered in some bust, so we got that back, and then maybe another 6 months after that, this like pawn shop was basically like, hey, like someone's trying to sell this black aluminum neck electrical guitar company series 2 bass. It wasn't too far from where we were robbed, and that robbery got enough attention that the shop was like, oh, we think we know who this belongs to, and there was a serial number scratched in the back, so they're able to trace it back to me. And
Nice.
yeah, fun fact about recovering gear from things like that is that it still takes forever to get your stuff back because
Right.
it's enters in as evidence, and
Yep.
you
got to prove it. You gotta,
Yeah.
Right.
and they won't ship you a guitar, so you have to be able to find someone to go get it, and
Yeah.
so it's a thing.
So that's your guitar. What are you using for amps right now?
I always use an Ampeg 8x10.
Okay.
And then amps, I'm switching between a high watt, they're 200 watt bass amp.
Because those aren't loud enough. Right?
Yeah, which is a really nice amp. And that's what I'm using for Russian circles, and I'll occasionally use that in Europe for like Botch and stuff, use that. But I also have a Science Mother that is my primary Sumac bass
Okay.
amp.
And then do you have any pedals you're using?
Yes, my main sound is a Fuzzrocious cattail.
Okay.
I kind of cycle through fuzzes. And then, yeah, the only other things that are really consistent is I use just the standard Crybaby bass wall a lot now, and Digitech whammy. And yeah, those are kind of like the main ones.
Cool. Do you have a favorite pedal?
I mean, I really like the cattail.
All right.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not like anything fancy, but it's just like, I try other grit pedals, and it's always, no, that's the one.
All right. What kind of strings are you using?
I use Ernie balls. I get custom, I do like 50, 70, 80, 125.
Okay.
So I just have to order them individually.
Do you have a favorite hardware finish?
Chrome.
All right. What are your thoughts and feelings on relic instruments?
I've never owned one. I'm of the opinion that instruments that look like they have some wear and tear look cooler.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get a brand new instrument, you're always very precious with it. So I could see a relic instrument being nice because you take away that fear of the first whiskey dent right off the bat.
That's exactly what most builders, that's their thought process behind it. It looks really cool, like it's got its own vibe to it, but like it also takes the sting out of it. It allows you to go play bar gigs.
Yeah.
And be
not worry
comfortable
about it.
playing.
Yeah, the first time you like jab the headstock into a cymbal, you're not like,
Oh.
yeah.
Right. Well, think about it. You buy a $6,000 custom shop Strat that's NOS. You put the ding in it. Now it's got this flaw. You buy the same $6,000 Strat that's a medium relic. You put the ding in it, and you never.
You don't even know.
You haven't lost any value on the instrument
Yeah.
in the same way you would on something that's non-relic. A band you wish you could play with, or do an album or a tour with, something like that.
I don't know. I don't think about that stuff very often.
You could.
I don't know. Wilco. Wilco would be
Cool, that's
fun.
cool.
Interesting.
We did have a Nels Klein reference recently.
Yeah.
Who was that? Who did we just have on?
I don't even remember.
Oh, Zach Cooper from
Oh, yeah.
Coheed was like, well, I'd like to make some noise with Nels Klein.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Great lines.
Nels is a shredder.
thanks to Ryan Stasek. What is your shopping cart etiquette when you go to the grocery store? Do you always return your cart to the cart corral?
Yeah.
100% of the time.
Yes.
Okay.
See, that's what's up.
Do I ever not do that? I'm trying to think if I've ever not.
Returned your shopping cart to the corral or
I mean,
the
always just back
store
to
or
the corral.
wherever.
Yeah.
This came up with the bass player for Umphreys McGee, and he's like, "This is how I judge that you're a good person or not."
Whether or not you return the cart.
Exactly, and he's
Yeah.
obviously of the mind of like, he's on the correct side of history.
Yeah.
You always return it, and Jody finally admitted that he's not.
Well,
always
there's
returning the cart.
Wow, okay.
Well, so this has also become a topic of discussion amongst my friends and I, because they've seen the clips. And today my buddy sent me a Reddit thing about the shopping cart theory, which is the shopping cart is the ultimate litmus test for whether a person is capable of self-governing.
That's right.
Because returning your shopping cart is easy, convenient task, and one which will recognize as the correct, appropriate thing to do.
But you're not required to do it.
But you're not required. You don't gain anything from it. You're not going to be, if you don't do it, there's no consequence, So it's like, I'll post a little thing on it.
Yeah, it's like it
Instagram
looks
for
like
our
it's like a
followers.
dissertation, but we get it.
Yeah,
we're good people over here on this side of the on this side of the room.
Listen, I've become better about return. I've never been I was always kind of like a 50% guy. Like, if the corral was close, I'll put it in the corral. If there was like a median kind of like shop, like, you go to the grocery store, there's like a little grass median, I'll like onto the median there. Which I've come to find out is like almost worse than just throwing it into another car.
Oh, it's such a
apparently.
fucking pain in the ass to get that like off. Imagine like someone trying to do that. Yeah.
Sure, it's so hard to get it off the curb. But now that I've been getting shamed about it on a regular basis, I'm definitely like, God damn it, I gotta put this car.
We're all learning. Yeah.
Trying to be a better person here. So that's the end of my questions. I'm sure Mark has a couple.
You've toured a lot of countries in your time. Which country has your favorite bathrooms?
Favorite bathrooms? Ooh, Japan.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is it the toilets?
It's the toilets.
Are they like? I've never been to Japan. It's definitely something I plan on doing. Do they all like live up to the hype? Are they all bidets, or is it just like?
I mean, not everyone is like state of the art modern, but like just in general, it's like, you sit down and like a pre-recorded waterfall sound happens or something where it's like, oh, cool, like
very clean.
Yeah, mask my disgusting sounds.
I can't do it without a fan, or sometimes I'll just like turn on the white noise app.
Yeah,
because I need that extra noise to hide my shame that like everybody can hear.
Yeah,
outside of that.
That, or you just like strategically just like yank on the toilet paper and cough really loud while the worst is
yeah.
Yeah.
So your Instagram username is Bubble Guts.
Mhm.
Is there a reference? Do you have like Bubble Guts issues, or is it just fun?
That's not where it came from. Although I guess I'm a 46-year-old man, so as with every 46-year-old, you're either dealing with heartburn or something. But it was originally because my initials are BBC. And people would call me BBC, and then Steve, the only singer from These Arms Are Snakes, misheard it and thought it was BBG, which if you've ever seen the first Friday sequel, I can't remember if that's next Friday.
Yeah.
One of the characters complains about having the BBGs, which is
Bubble Guts.
Bubble Guts.
Interesting.
So he's like, what does the BBG mean? Bubble Guts? It's like, that's Brian Bruce Cook. That's my name. So...
Nice.
But now it's Bubble Guts. So.
I know you a little bit better now. That's good. So as far as like, touring, you mentioned Love's being like the superior gas station. Is there a country in particular where you're like, you just are in love with like all of the gas stations? I'm imagining you're going to a lot of gas stations and stuff.
We always talk about Italy because they have the auto grills, and the auto grills just have like great food. It's still a gas station.
Yeah.
Great food, but you have to deal with Italians. And Italians have no sense of how to form a queue. So it's just like mob rule. Like,
get out of my way.
Yeah, you just have to like
muscle
your way in and be like, I want my cappuccino and my buffalo.
You just send Melodic up there?
Yeah.
Yep, just to run the steer it?
Yeah, and then he just gets angry and frustrated. But but the food's great. So
Melodic is this dude he's from Czech Republic. And he's just another like big tattooed, bearded, hardcore guy.
Yeah.
and just fearless, just zips through, I bet.
Hey, you
Yeah.
gotta treat it like the pit, bro. You gotta
Yep.
get in there.
Yeah.
and-
It's pit etiquette.
So you have, actually, speaking of him, you have a song named after him, and
Mhm.
I think that there's like a few songs that you all have named after like friends and
Mhm.
significant things. Like, what's the song, like, what the song title process, like, what's that usually entail?
I think we just like to keep it cryptic, but you know, you have to name it something, and it's nice to just have little homages to
Little tributes to your buds.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We'll have a Jody at some point, right?
Right.
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, honestly, man, like that's pretty much it. I always just fly by the seat of my pants with my questions. They're not like calculated. I just
Gotcha.
think of the first thing ever, man. But dude, thank you for taking
Yeah,
time.
thanks
Yeah.
for coming. If somebody wants to check out Russian Circles, where would you send them to?
Oh,
Instagram, Facebook, YouTube?
Google it.
yeah.
Just Google, whatever. We're not
Yeah.
hard to find.
Yeah, it's somewhere out there.
All right.
Your
And
usual portals into whatever the music world will
Yeah.
work.
use your Googs.
Yeah.
I would recommend checking out YouTube. I think it was the Audio Tree, right? Is that the one?
Yeah, we did a couple with Audio Tree, I believe.
Yeah, and Audio Tree always does like really great video stuff. The audio quality is always really great, and so I watched that recently. It was very good, and there's like a little interview in there too,
Oh, yeah.
happening throughout that whole thing. So if you're dipping your toe into the Russian circles, I think that's a good place to start.
There you go.
Right. All right. Well, that's it. Bye. Wait. Like, subscribe. We're really trying to get our followers up on YouTube. Smash that like button.
Ugh.
Ugh.
Yeah, this shit. It's like,
Right here.
oh my God. Ugh.